Okay, with all the racing and engine modifications that we talk about, this is equally important. It's about buying your second-hand car, specifically on Honda Civic, but other brands will apply, and how not to get tricked, and the stuff that you need to check that nobody tells you to check, but it's very, very important. This is gonna avoid you buying a unit that as soon as you get it home or even the next day, you start seeing problems. And this way, it causes less headaches and of course gets your hard-earned money spent well by not buying a crappy car or get duped into buying an inferior car. So sit back and find out all the tips and tricks. A lot are into racing and engine build, especially in the Philippines. But when buying a car, it's always about the opinion of friends. But since it's your hard earned money, might as well understand how to properly check and correctly know what's up with the car. So here's a list that I made for you. Okay, here we start. Number one, don't buy it at night because no matter how good the person inspects, at night we get to miss or not see a lot of small details. And then number two, check the tires. On the front, turn the front tire to the left or to the right, like Beyonce says. Anyways, just to see if the wear is equal from the inner and outer. And on the rear, you can see it from the back. Then of course, check engine oil, check radiator coolant if it's water, because if it's water, then the owner is not really concerned about the engine's health, because we know coolant has an anti-rust, so it prevents rust from creating corrosion, because our water is actually really bad for rust or for corrosion. And then, of course, brake fluid and all that. Oh, yeah, and one trick thing to know is that if the car is always running on thin brake pads or running it out, the pistons of the caliper tends to push out more. And therefore, it gets the brake fluid dirty really quick. So when you see a car with dirty brake fluid, you know what's up. That means the owner just keeps using it until it wears out. And you're trying to establish the character of the owner. This way, you know how the history of the car is, instead of just hearing their stories. And now on the number 7, it's kind of trick. Test drive and listen carefully. You have to drive it, and let's say if there's a speed hump or speed bump, don't drive it fast. Just pay attention to the rear, specifically the rear, because if there's a thud sound or a clanking sound, that just means the top hat is worn out. That's either because the car was previously running coilovers and they suddenly just put stock to sell the car, or it's just simply worn out. It's just things that you need to know before buying the car. And then read up online the reviews or the known condition of the car model that you're buying, because you would always find some reasons or some stories about usual issues. And of course, after sitting on the driver's seat earlier, try to feel it. You can feel if it's worn or the seats are worn, the side bolsters and all of that. If it's good, it's good. And then finally, restart the car and see if it feels or sounds the same, because a lot of times after checking for a while, it suddenly just starts showing up other issues. Okay, bored you enough. One thing to check also on the engine bay is a lot of times locally, the jumper, the thermo switch for the radiator, this way it's just continuously running. That's because there's an overheating issue they're trying to hide or solve incorrectly. So when the owner or the seller says the fan is on automatic, meaning it's not jumpered or not recta, that's good. But it's not only that you should check. You should also check how long it runs with the fan on, because every connection means more resistance, and because it's a 0 to 5 volt sensor, a different resistance means it's confusing the temperature. Sometimes it runs just slowly, so let's check it out. But let me show you this on startup first. Notice the oil light. It turns off right before it runs. That means the oil pressure is good, the engine is healthy. I mean, the oil light turns on below 10 psi, or it turns off when it reaches over 10 psi. So on startup, if it takes longer, you know the engine is worn out. Let's look at it again. Key on, ignition. Yeah, see that? The oil light turns off. So now let's warm it up and look at the radiator fan because it's automatic and not recta. Oh, and mind you, even if the engine is warm, the oil light does not take longer than a few seconds. It's supposed to go off right away. Okay, now here we are warming up the car. There. And as you can see, the fan is not yet running because, of course, the engine is still cold. So we gotta wait up to warm it up. And you can do this, have your phone ready and turn on the stopwatch so you can clock it if you want when you're checking the car. Actually, I suggest you do that. This way, you get the actual reading of the time because it's hard to count it off because they can just suddenly talk to you and throw you off. There, it's warming up. It's not yet up, it's not yet operating temperature yet. Okay, now it's 40 to 45 minutes later. Okay, I was trying to do the voice. Okay, let's check. Oh, there. Now you count the timer on, and of course you turn it off once the fan stops running, obviously. And this one, I timed it before, and it's roughly 19.3 seconds. So, that is not bad, right? And here now you can see its operating temperature is good now, right? And if you remember the list that I made earlier, we're gonna drive it around just to see and all that. But of course, this is not a unit that I'm about to buy. This is a customer's car, so we're gonna back it up and yeah, rev it a bit. So you just test drive and how with the list that I made for you guys. And the reason why we show you that radiator fan, because a lot of times they just run for 4 to 5 seconds with bad connection. Next up is this USB adapter for the cigarette lighter, but we suggest to get the one with the voltmeter. And this is cheap, around like maybe $20. If you're international, we can get this for you. But locally, you can just get this in Lazada. But the reason why we want it with a voltmeter is because you can show you initially the wiring issues or no issues of the car. Now let me show you mine. This is my trusty USB adapter for the cigarette lighter. You can see there's an LED or a digital voltmeter or display. Let's start the car first. Let me show you. We will see if the wiring is good or subpar or excellent. Oh, there. Look, it's 14 volts when it's running because the alternator is running and continuously charging. And of course, the ECU decides when it's charging or not and all that. The normal voltage running condition or the status is there, 14.1 volts, and you rev it, it's still consistent. That's when it's good. But when it's below that, like let's say 13.4, that's no good. Next up is we show you why having a digital voltmeter is handy when looking at the car. We will show you where to check. Let's go. Now, of course, here's a voltmeter. We all know what it looks like. It could be either this way or that way or even this. Look. Okay, don't be doing this all the time because you might ruin it, okay? I'm gonna quote what Clyde, owner of Clyde Wire, said on why this is important to check on the wires. He said this: one of the very basic rules of electricity, when the wire heats up, the higher the resistance will be and or amperage load goes low. So when you think about it, I'm sure some of you guys have heard of cars after 4 or 5 laps down the track, it starts to misfire, starts to act up. So when you think about it, it's not the harness's fault. It's probably one of those weird wirings that you guys jumpered and whatnot. So like I said before, that's like a 6-letter word. Not even amateur. A six-letter word. Yep. So let's go, let's test this out. Here at the bolt of the throttle, you can see it's still 14 something volts. And even the shock tower, the positive is right on the battery. We're using the negative or the voltmeter to check. This is the thermostat housing, which is the ground of the ECU and harness. This is on the map sensor bolt. It's still 14.15. So you know this is good. It is the ground towards the harness and it's still reading properly. And here, trick way, instead of removing the fuse, the two dots on top would show you the connection. If it's zero, then it's broken. Another top reason for having a voltmeter is that to check all your fuse without even removing it, you would see if it's busted or not. Here's the dot you can see on top. You can poke that on the ground and see if it's gonna light up or not. If it shows any voltage, then it's good. It still could. It still has connection. But if it doesn't, then it's busted. You know you can change that, right? That's a good thing of checking. But of course, in this case, it's more about checking the wiring quality or the wiring condition of the car that you're about to get or purchase. And so it's more on checking this stuff and even the harness ground. And of course, this is the most important one, the ground by the thermostat housing, because that's where the ground of the ECU gets and even the fan. So, hey, this got to be good. And also check this side, the driver's side shock tower, this part of the harness, because a lot of people jumper this for either an extra light or even the positive for their horn or wang wang or whatever. And it's kind of dumb because this confuses the engine. Here, a diagram showed to me by Clywire. The red line is actually pin number 3, a yellow black wire, which is all constant positive because the ECU throws on a ground signal. So if you jumper this for a horn or a light, you ruin the signal or affect the signal for the IACV, for the injectors, for the map sensor, and even the TPS. So if you ever notice, cars with all those weird accessories always tend to run bad or have a bad tune. It's not the tune, it's the freaking harness. So when they remove all that, they will tape it up and make it seem like it's all stock. This is why you have to check all that and with a voltmeter. So they can claim all stock, but resistance would say otherwise, right? And another thing they claim is that it's never been opened or whatnot, but you can check on this part in between the block and the head if there is copper spray or whatever sealant here, then you would know they actually removed the head and just made it all stock again. So that's not a never been opened engine. And this part here, you can see it here if there's a copper spray or marks or whatever. And those are the telltale signs that it's been rebuilt before. And sure, there's nothing wrong with it. But if the owner says it's never been opened, the problem here is why lie in the first place, right? So they must be hiding something. So you have to beware of those stuff or be aware of those. And as I mentioned earlier on my list on the brake reservoir, look, you can check it. And if it's dirty, then you know what's up. Like I said before, right? That means it's been running till it finishes all the brake pads. That's why the pistons dirty up the brake oil or the brake oil. And also the clutch oil, the reserve, check everything is level because of course they're always gonna level it before selling the car, but you gotta check for signs. Next up is compression test the car. This is a 97,000 kilometer car, the mileage, but it's also first owned and all original, so let's check. Alright, now cylinder 1.
Sige.
Oh, 200. Okay, then cylinder 2, let's go.
Sige.
Not bad. Also 200. Remember, 97,000 plus kilometers mileage.
Sige. Up.
Oh, 200 still. That's pretty good, actually. And finally,
Sige.
oh man, nice. All right. So that's pretty consistent. It's a good condition. This car is actually the one that we featured here that you can click here or even in the description below to watch the video about this car. And it's also going to be doing the build series that we planned, that we're gonna base run first before rebuild and then base run again after. So you know you gotta subscribe to stay updated on that. And also we're actually designing a new grounding kit that's specifically to work accurately and properly, that we're gonna offer locally and also for international people. So you know you're gonna subscribe so you can check our shop page and all that to be updated. You know you want that.